some other things, but let me just introduce. So today's Success Hour session from CxXchange is how to build your board of directors, which I'm really excited about. Shaun Porcar will be co-leading this session. So let me stop sharing now for a second and put it back over to Shaun. Please just share a couple of words about yourself. Not everybody has met you before and grown to love you as we all do.
Well, thank you, Jan. It's wonderful to be on this side of the camera. Usually I'm picking up my daughter today from preschool, and as it turns out, it's her 5th birthday. So, different type of win to celebrate there for sure. So my background in tech goes back a bit. Been largely customer facing for over 15 years now. I usually like to share that I started my career in sales because it adds a lot of context to the success that I've had, and really the focus on revenue in a lot of the early stage companies that I've been fortunate to have been a part of. For the last decade or so, I've been focused on customer success, and in particular, getting in early stage, typically late seed, Series A, and really focusing on building out the team and the process for scale as we approach early growth stage into Series A, Series B, Series C. So I've been fortunate to do that for a variety of companies over the last decade, and currently, as many in this group are experiencing, a lot of the change and restructuring going on in the tech environment. Exploring new opportunities. But while I'm doing that, it's been wonderful to really get more involved with the group here and help build out collaboration groups, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, and do some more fun things like building out a board of directors for myself in a little more informal fashion, and also helping many others through mentorship and coaching. So with that, Jen, back to you, and we can dive in here.
Yeah, let's dive in. And I know that there's a lot of folks here who will have thoughts on this topic as well as questions. So please feel free to speak up. Let me just make it so if I don't see you, because not everybody's on this screen, you can always do the raise hand bar at the bottom. You can find that. Okay. So what is a personal board of directors? That's probably first thing we should probably cover. And really, when you think of it, it's not a formal board, right? What it is a network really of independent advisors. And so these are folks that you trust, who can give you feedback and guidance, even people that you might collaborate with. So it might be colleagues and peers, whether it's at your company or in the greater community, or people who have experience or they're a little further along in their career. They could also be people that you are a mentor to, right? Because, as we practice in CxXchange, where we have leaders, CSMs, and people transitioning into CS, when you are supporting someone who isn't as far along in their career, then you actually gain those insights and start to say, oh, wait a minute. And you understand like what you understand and how far you've come along, right? So it's really then sort of a personal community that you're building intentionally. Shaun, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I think that the intentional point is what I really wanted to emphasize here, because although I said a moment ago that I've been focusing on more informally building this board of directors for myself, it's something that I've gone about probably over the last 10 years of my career, but not really in an intentional fashion, right? More opportunistic, I would say, whether it's through having the fortune to work for someone who's just really driven and assertive in their career, and also someone that nurtured and encouraged me as well. Was fortunate to work with a leader a couple of companies ago, and since then we've certainly stayed in touch, and I'd say I've sort of formalized the way that I will catch up with him, whether I'm exploring new opportunities or facing a particularly difficult problem myself. But I think this whole initiative stems from a perspective of we're here in an organization where we typically are successful as a team. And when you think about your career, most of us are probably, going about it largely, by ourselves. And I think the simple fact that you all have taken the time out of your, busy day to join this community shows that you have a desire to learn and be proactive with your career. And I think this is one of the most important strategies that you can employ to really, level yourself up personally and professionally, and do it in a similar fashion to how you would level up your team and the organization that you're part of, as part of your day jobs, whether it's an early stage company or a large, public organization. So really thinking about this with some intentionality is something that I want to try to emphasize today. And we'll talk a little bit more about the different types of groups and different diversity that you might want to consider to add to your board.
And just as we move on to the next page, I would just add that it's never too early to build your board of directors, and it's never too late in your career that you would want to have a board of directors, right? So this is something where early on in your career, when you're, just starting out, you might have a board of directors that you're starting to build and cultivate, right? These are colleagues in your community and in your company. And they may continue to evolve and change over time, but it's always the right time for building a board of directors. So some of the things that, like, there are some, you'll see, like, there's some books and articles that might take it a step further and even make it a little more formal of a process, where you start to think, what is your purpose for your board of directors, right? And I think that while you are trying to be proactive and intentional, it is a good idea to think about, what is the direction my career is taking? Who do I want to add into my circle? Where, and the other thing I'd say is, like, it's important that you think about of, how you give as well as what you get. It's not just what you get, right? This is an interchange in this group that you're building. So if you're thinking
Yeah.
about what your purpose is, and you think about what direction you're going in your career, what perspectives are you lacking? What things are you curious about? Who might you reach out to? And what outcomes are you looking for? Are you trying to improve skills, or is it career progression time? And if you do this while you're, in whatever stage, whether you're doing job seeking or working at a company, then you'll always have people that you can rely on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's particularly important because, unlike a company board, this is a group of folks that you most likely will only meet on a one-on-one basis, and the time horizon may be monthly, or it could be annually. It really depends on who this person is and what your particular goals are. So to briefly get a little bit more specific into one of the ways to approach building your board, I want to challenge each of you to think about, as you wrap up the conversations in your breakout groups and go off into your evening, what are the particular challenges or needs that you have professionally, or what are things that might be holding you back in your career or impacting your work-life balance, right? That's something I think became more of a forefront in the conversation, particularly after COVID. And these are things that can help you start to think about, what is the purpose of your board. And the fact remains for most of us that we probably already know a lot of people that we may want to invite. But as you start thinking about what purpose you want to focus in on, that'll very quickly help you see who would make sense to reach out to and potentially have more regular and frequent conversations with. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about briefly is just identifying the types of folks that are a good fit for your board. First off, there's no rule that says you need to have 3 people or 5 people or 15 people, right? It's whatever feels comfortable for you. But ideally, these are folks that you'll spend quality time with on a regular basis, and you'll keep them updated with what's happening in your career. In order to truly give to get, you've got to think about, well, I'm asking for value from this person on a regular basis. What am I going to give that person in return? And oftentimes, just the acknowledgement of their time and a simple update to let them know how an interview went, or how a project went, or how a difficult renewal went is probably more than they're looking for. But it's particularly important to think about the role that these folks will play, and who you may already know in your network, or who you may want to reach out to, who might be a good fit for your board. And we've got some of the details here on the slide, but certainly happy to talk more about that if there's any questions, or or ideas around adjacent industries, like folks maybe in the VC space, or even an attorney if you're someone who likes to spend a lot of time around early stage companies where there's a lot of volatility, a lot of questions around how to handle equity and how to negotiate those sorts of things.
So we don't have a lot of instructions here, right? But we do have a number of resources, things that you can read if that helps you feel more comfortable with it. There is actually LinkedIn posts and articles to various books where they've sort of talked about it. Even my favorite author, Britt Andreatta, when she's talking about how we're wired to connect and wired to become, right? All of these things figure into how we develop ourselves. And we even have collaboration groups that figure into this, right? That when you are developing relationships and building relationships with your colleagues, collaboration groups fill a part of that, right? It's not just when you're job searching. It could be in your first 6 months or 6 months plus in a role, right? When you're trying to just get other perspectives, right? And think about who you might connect with. So I want to just maybe take it away from the sharing the screen for a second and just check in, because I see some notes over in the chat, people who feel familiar with this topic, but also you might have some questions. So what sort of things come to mind as we're discussing being intentional about building your professional network and thinking of it as a personal board of directors? Is this useful to you?
Do you want me to raise my hand?
No, go ahead. Come.
Okay. Hi. It's very useful to me. In fact, I think we all have a board of directors. It's just whether or not we're conscious of that and whether or not we're really investing the time and the energy. Because if we don't have one in outside people, there is one in our heads, right? That tells, does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Hear that
So
voice?
yes.
It
And
happened for you too,
sometimes it's
then.
the wrong voice sometimes. I'm just saying, right? It's always good to have to bounce these thoughts off of other people and then get really qualitative and quality feedback. That's all I mean. Yeah.
Great.
That's a great point, Megan. I think most of us have probably had those moments where we've thought, what would, my manager do, or what would the CEO do, right? Particularly if you had some good examples that you've worked for. Those are, great perspectives, not the same as having someone you can actually bounce ideas off in person, but, it helps you kind of put yourself into a person's shoes to maybe think a little bit more objectively about a situation and how you might want to approach it.
Yeah. Ashrita?
Yeah, I think this is like a very, very interesting topic. And I think also it's a very long-term strategy. And like sometimes initially, if like, I think a lot of people, especially even in entry-level positions, would actually see or hear that, oh, you need to create this board of directors. And it can be quite intimidating because you think that, okay, I'm going to reach out to these senior level people, and like, why would they give time or like time of day to me? Because I might not necessarily have anything to give back to them. And so that's where I kind of struggled initially, but now that I've started volunteering for like a women in sales boot camp, and it's just like I'm just like trying to actually learn from giving back to people. They don't probably realize that I'm getting something out of it. And I think that's like something that a lot of people should have perspective of like, even if don't feel like you're giving back to someone, you might not realize that you're actually giving back by helping them teach you something. But then that being said, I still struggle even now, despite that knowledge, that like identifying the people who will want to put that time in and being okay with someone who's not willing to put that time in.
Yeah, and sometimes people are busy and so they may not, but you can also think about then, who else might I reach out to? But what Shaun and I were actually discussing too is that, in fact, you know, when you think about how many generations there are in the workplace, for someone who is in older and in a you know, a generation that's more mature, let's call it, you know, all of a sudden they might be managing, you know, much younger generations, and they might really appreciate having that perspective and having someone that they can say, hey, what do you think of this? Is this off base to you too? Or am I coming to it, you know, at maybe the wrong angle or something, right? And so it can be valuable to talk to people who are, you know, further ahead in your career, but also earlier in your career. And there are ways in which you're exchanging information. So always think about that there's something in it for every person. And
Yeah.
how do you give back so that they get that? Sarah.
I just wanted to like really highlight the fact that I love that you all discussed that like branch outside of just the CS department. Like we need a board of directors for many aspects of our life, and that's when I had that realization of my husband is part of my board, because I would work 24/7 if no one kept me in check. And
Many of us probably would.
Yeah, I know, me too.
he keeps me in check and reminds me that, you know, work will be there in the morning. You can come back to it tomorrow. Nothing is life or death, especially in my particular role. So I think it's really important to really look at some of the things that you struggle, whether it's, you know, a lot of us suffer with, you know, ADHD and, you know, keeping focus, and even just having someone on your board to give you strategies on like how to keep focus on what can be pretty monotonous tasks in our roles. Just little things like that. I think it's great to start thinking about your career more holistically instead of just how do I climb the ladder.
Yep.
Especially now, the market is quite tumultuous, as we've seen over the last couple of years. So even if you feel secure and safe, it's always a good idea to check in with someone and say, hey, here's what's going on in the office. You know, are there any red flags here I should watch out for?
Yeah.
Right. All right, we'll do Fran, Jay, and Elizabeth, and then we'll go to, I'll show you the questions and we'll go to the breakout groups. Fran.
I'll be really quick because
Yeah.
mine was, I didn't realize that I was doing it, although I know the fear of like reaching out to people that you feel like, well, they're really like higher level people and they're not going to want to talk to me. That's what my job search was. I had one friend, Pam Misnick, who many of you know. She's not here tonight because it's the second night of Passover, and I'm sure she's observing, but she basically gave me a couple names, and I just started reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'm job searching. Would you give me 15 minutes? I'd love to hear your story. And then that person sent me to somebody else who
Yeah.
did the same thing and gave me a whole bunch of advice. And I was like, it also built, again, I was giving them the gift of, being an excited listener, but the generosity that I felt. And then when I joined this group, I mean, everybody knows I'm the biggest fan of this group and our fearless leader, but I feel like it's been a gift. I need to build my personal board of directors, but just the experience of confidently saying, hey, I can reach out to Shaun. He's not gonna put me down, not just because we've met on here, but because he wants to help other people and I want to learn. And so it's just great. And maybe part of it is that a lot of us are in customer success, so we want to give back too.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, see, the customer success is a great community that way. And Fran, the way that those people that you initially reached out to and met during your job search, the way that they become part of your board of directors is you follow up with them. And so I just want to share the screen really quickly with to do that. But it's on the notes that you should be downloading, because you want to send thanks, you want to give them updates, you want to let them know that they had an impact, what the result was, right? Let them know what's happening along your journey because of the type of advice that they gave you. And if there's some way that you can help them in return, you can start to think about, how to be creative. But sometimes it's just saying, hey, thanks, that was really helpful. And that means a lot to them. Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. A couple quick comments from the peanut gallery. So the first thing that came to mind for the first author that came to mind for me is Brene Brown, and one of her assertions to lead to have strength through vulnerability. And I think when you go through the process of building your board of directors, you're putting yourself in a position where you're being vulnerable, one, with yourself, and asking yourself, what are my skills and what are my weaknesses, and do I want my board to help me become the best at something that I'm good at, or to get better at something that I'm not great at, and because that, or maybe split the difference and have a little bit of both. But I still think the exercise of going through that self-reflective process can be super insightful. Even if you decide, you know what, actually, I'm pretty good. I don't need a board, but at least now you've gone through that process, so you have a better understanding of where you are in relation to where you want to go.
Just going to challenge you briefly on that. I think we can all use a board. None of us needs to be in it alone, but.
So what leads me to my second comment, which is in another book, not related at all to any of this. It was written by a therapist, and he was saying how with some of his clients, the analogy that he uses, it's like you live life as if you were living in a bottle, and everybody else can see the label on the bottle except for you, because you're in it. And that's also one of the, so to make the connection here, one of the value adds of having a board of directors is that they can see things that you can't. Or to quote Donald Rumsfeld, I can't believe I'm actually quoting him, we don't know what we don't know. So, but mind you, I live in Canada, so I think I'm okay. And then the third piece of the third comment is that when we talk about, well, I guess when I talk about a board, my mind immediately goes to, oh, like a group of like 10 people. It doesn't need to be that big. You can build a board with a handful. I mean, you can go as big or small as you need. But I wanted to put that out there in case anybody else was thinking, well, crap, I don't know, like 10 people to sit on my board. Even a handful is more than enough.
Right. Elizabeth, and then we'll show the questions.
Thank you. No, I'm on the totally in agreement with the being vulnerable part of it, that it opens up a lot of paths, doors, windows, whatever you want to call it. And to be more practical, you can think about it even when you join a new place, a new job, you kind of have to build relationships. You should. You're not, you should.
Absolutely should. First 6 months is critical.
You have to build your own like internal board at work to know, we reach out to different heads of departments, or you don't even know how they're going to react, but you can say like, oh, I'm facing this particular situation. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And you'll hear something very succinct, may actually go the extra mile, and you get to learn their personality. How willing are they to work with you? What potentially could work? And that will grow over time. And that's an approach that you can use even outside of work. Like, what do you think? Just, you want to hear them. You want to hear their thoughts, and people want to be heard, want to share. So just give them that opportunity. Not everyone's going to respond the same way, in a way that you might think that it is amazing, but at least just be open to it. And that's just a practical way to, to look at it.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so in the breakout questions then, if we can just get those links back into the chat one more time, and then we'll see the breakout notes, as well as if you want these slides again, go ahead and download those. When have you received guidance feedback from peer or senior colleagues helped you navigate a situation? How did it impact you? And if you've built a board, how did you develop it? And if not, how might you build one? So that's what we're going to be discussing for the next 20 minutes. And I'm going to set up the breakout rooms here. So how was that? How did things go? Any sort of aha moments to share? What did we gather here in our notes and in our conversations? Yeah, Trevor?
I mean, what we talked about was sort of people who have a hard time like asking for help or seeking out that help, and especially when they're talking about like making this sort of board. And one of the things that you guys basically covered, don't tell her this, but you basically do the same thing Carly does, which I'm in her program, which is, accept that people are either going to help or they won't. And don't take it personally. They might be just like you. They might be super busy. They might have a lot of things going on. I've had it to where first time I reach out to someone, nothing. Doesn't want to talk to me, nothing to do with me. I reach out like 6 months later. They're like, oh my gosh, hey, like what's going on? Like, yeah, of course I'd love to talk to you. You know what I mean? It just depends. So it's like, if they don't, just move on to someone else. If you feel like trying to try again later, you can. If they help, they help. If they don't, they don't. Don't take it personally.
And another thing too, is because we have LinkedIn, if people are posting and you comment on their post and you have a nice exchange there, it's very easy to follow up with a message and continue the conversation or share something else. It's a great way to build a relationship, with someone virtually first. And then you can always start to build that relationship in a more casual way. It's not like you have to formally say, will you be on my board of directors? It doesn't have to be scary like that. It's just that it's basically, you're building a relationship and you understand, you're being intentional about who you're building those relationships with, right? Randy, what kinds of thoughts do you have on this?
So it's interesting when you have conversations. There are a number of us that had kind of recently got jobs within the last, let's say, 6 months, right? And the path that we all took to kind of get where we're at.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was brought up was your board obviously is the people you reach out to for advice, et cetera. But I also think it helps in regards to what a lot of us deal with, which was part of what I dealt with, which is the imposter syndrome, right? Which is that level of confidence you can get from the people around you that support you, that give you the ability to speak out and to, post on LinkedIn or a blog or whatever it might be, because there are people that have given you advice to give you the confidence to know, okay, I can talk about this topic, or they've given you that, hey, what you're doing or saying or whatever it might be. And so that's a big part of, we had that discussion about really creating that environment that creates that ability to kind of get through that, which is a big problem that keeps people back from dealing with that outwardly aspect you need to in our community, in the CSM community.
Right. And that's why it's important to have include in your board colleagues, as well as people who maybe aren't as far along in your career as you, or maybe if you've switched careers and maybe there's someone who is now looking to switch careers, right? Someone who's earlier in whatever path or trajectory that you're in. That's when you get to say, oh, wow, I did learn something. I do know something. I have something to share. So it's a way to get beyond that imposter syndrome if you're feeling it. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Absolutely. And Fran, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot a bit, you had commented earlier on just kind of feeling that challenge of reaching out. You were fortunate to work for Boaz for a number of years, and I've been fortunate to have a few conversations with him, generally around hiring and opportunities. But now that you've moved on, he'd be an amazing person to have in your corner if you haven't already had that conversation. He's always so kind and gracious and very candid. I just love his feedback, right? And perfect example of someone that you can reach out to if you haven't already.
Yeah, he was the one who decided that I was going to be laid off. So still a little bit of, I haven't.
Speaking of being candid.
Yeah, and Ramiana the same. Yeah, he decided on the three of us, and yeah, he's a great contact. I just need to let a little more time pass before I reach out to him.
Well,
but he is great. You're right.
And the other thing too, you can think about is if it's not one person, maybe there's someone similar, right?
Oh yeah, no, there's some great
as you're
people over there
talking to others in your network, and you say, hey, I want to fill in this gap here. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
And oftentimes it can, be someone or maybe it's someone you don't know, but someone else that knows, right? 6 degrees of separation. Sarah.
A person that I've unofficially added to my board. Like I might make it a more official relationship now that we've had this conversation, is actually the recruiter that got me in at Donut, because shortly after I joined, I asked if I could just have like 30 minutes of her time. I wanted to understand, like, why did she pick my LinkedIn profile out of all the LinkedIn profiles? And I got so much great information from that meeting that, one, I feel better about, my own imposter syndrome. Is everything set up in a way that it needs to be? And then I also have a lot of really great information that I can share with people who are on the job hunt, which puts me in a really great position to give back, especially even if I'm working with someone on my board who is more experienced than I am, but maybe they've been impacted by layoffs. That's my opportunity to give back, because I have taken that time to understand like what made my resume stand out.
Right.
So, that's something that I've done and may continue to do, to just understand like what's the recruiter perspective, because if we're all going to be honest with ourselves, even if we are comfortable in a role, we kind of always need to just be ready to look for the next one, because jobs are just not really stable anymore. So I think it's good to just be, on the ready just in case.
Yeah, and it's always the right time to have a board of directors because of that. This is your network essentially, right? You always want to have a good network. Great point, Sarah. Ramanya.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to offer quickly in our group something that Elizabeth especially highlighted, and I think it's worth calling out: the sort of commitment to nurture. I mean, that's why we call it nurturing. But it's a commitment. Like, it takes this intentionality to reach out, even if you feel like I haven't talked to this person or mentor for a while. Sort of be intentional about it and purposeful, because we always get caught up in what's in front of our nose. So to me, that was kind of a nice takeaway for this dynamic.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, it intentional, not just in reaching out, but in following up and just,
Yeah.
this is really what it is. It's about intention. So
if
yeah,
I realize
Shaun?
we're past half hour, but
Yeah.
one of the things I was contemplating adding as part of the question list of questions there was if anyone has developed a system that they particularly like for keeping track of their network, for something that they could use for the nurturing that Rumiana just talked about. I personally, I've tried a few things, but kind of always reverted back to either Notion or a Google Sheet, but always open to ideas, and maybe others here would benefit from some different ideas or systems that you guys may be using.
Sounds like
Oh, it
we
looks
need a
like
CRM
that
for
just
that.
brought something up. Getdex.com.
Yep.
One place for
Yeah.
your relationships, impressed with your thoughtfulness.
Yeah, so Sarah and I have been using this. It's basically a personal CRM that syncs with your LinkedIn and your Gmail and some of your social media if you so decide. Yeah, so basically just a personal CRM that you can set reminders for that nurturing and follow up, and you can put notes in there and everything like you would for a normal CRM.
Oh my God, I love this. I love this. Wow.
I will share,
never
it
knew
was
about
overwhelming after like the first 3-month period went by, and I got the realization of how many people I said that I wanted to follow up with every 3 months, and I got blasted with about 150 emails, and I was like, whoa, maybe I don't need to keep in touch with this many people every 3 months.
Right. As much as you enjoy them, it's like that's a lot of work. Well, and that's another reminder about being intentional, and how often do you need to check in with someone? Sometimes it's every 6 months, or maybe it's quarterly, but maybe it's not. So yeah.
Yeah. It kind of
And-
gave me
and-
that realization that I had bitten too much or bitten more than I could chew.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that we have this group that stayed through the end to get that fantastic resource. And we do have it in the chat, and we'll put it over in the notes as well. Shaun, thank you so much for everything you've been doing to build out collaboration groups. We have a few others that have been really helping to organize collaboration groups. In the notes or in the slides, on the last slide, you'll see all the different channels. Anything that starts with collab. Collab is where you find the collab groups over in Slack. So feel free to, they're all self-organized groups. It's a great way to get started on building your network and your board of directors. We have them for CS leaders and CSMs if you're job searching, if you're in your first 6 months or 6 months plus. It's always great to start today. I guess they talk about your data and things like that, but it's the same with your network. The best time to build your network was 5 years ago, and the next best time is today. So hopefully we
Absolutely.
inspired some folks.
And if I may make a shameless plug, I purposely included the word volunteers in there. If anyone is aspiring to be a leader, whether that is a leader in a formal capacity or informal capacity, jumping in to lead a collaboration group is a great way to get started, and also a great way to jumpstart your network. It's certainly by design that Jan and I have built out this collaboration group program, and we'd love for anyone who's been participating as a member, if they'd love to step up and lead one. This will continue to grow organically, and we certainly value those who have volunteered thus far, and we'd love to see more of you, jump in and lead one if that's something that you would like to try doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you staying a few extra minutes. All right.
Oh, and don't forget to fill out the survey.
Oh, yes, the survey that pops up at the end. Absolutely. And next week, Sarah is going to be helping me lead the session. We're going to be talking about our new program, Voice Vanguard. It's how to build your thought leadership. All right. So I hope to see you all there and spread the word. It's never too early to start building your thought leadership as well. Okay. All right. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Shaun.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.